love the gospel of the Lord.
Heart to Heart, a Catholic media ministry, presents an inspiring gospel reflection by Father Michael Sparrow. Father Michael is a Jesuit priest working as a writer and retreat master at the Bellarmine Jesuit Retreat House outside Chicago.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus summoned the crowd again and said to them, "Hear me, all of you, and understand. Nothing that enters one from outside can defile that person. For the things that come from out are not what defile. What comes from within are what defile." When he got home away from the crowd, his disciples questioned him about the parable. He said to them, "Are even you likewise without understanding? Do you not realize that everything that goes into a person from outside cannot defile, since it enters not the heart, but the stomach, and passes out into the latrine? Thus he declared all foods clean. But what comes out of the person, that is what defiles. From within the man, from his heart, comes evil thoughts, unchastity, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, licentiousness, envy, blasphemy, arrogance, folly. All of these come from within, and they defile." The Gospel of the Lord. In today's Gospel, Jesus again is involved in a controversy with the Pharisees who are obsessing over the dietary restrictions. And as you just heard, Jesus said, it's not the food that we eat that defiles us. What defiles us is what comes out of our hearts. And so we need to pray to be able to say what's coming out of our hearts. Chesterton, G.K. Chesterton, the great American, or the great Catholic pundit, theologian, said that original sin is the only doctrine of our faith that is empirically provable. Just look around at the state of the world. Just look into the mirror and we have proof of the power and the reality of original sin. And yet the problem is that it is so much easier to see the sin in our brother or sister than it is within ourselves. St. Ignatius in the spiritual exercises say that there are three people who make retreats. There are three kinds of people that are trying to grow in the spiritual life. The first kind of person looks in the mirror, sees what the reality is, but does nothing about it. Because it requires change, a change of heart, a change of mind, and the price is simply too great. The second kind of person looks in the mirror of truth, sees the state of their soul, and starts obsessing about everything, and maybe will make some significant changes in minor areas of their life, but doesn't address the most significant issue. I think that's the case with the scribes and the Pharisees, who are well aware of the state of sin within the world, and what they do is they obsess about dietary restrictions, about cleaning hands, about what they eat and what they don't eat, because they don't want to address the major issue in their heart of their own obstinacy, their own arrogance, their own judgmental attitudes, the ways in which they hold themselves above everyone else and look down their noses at the rest of humanity. They're willing to make all of these little changes, but they don't address the major issue in their life. The third kind of person, says St. Ignatius, is the one who looks in the mirror of truth and prays for the grace to address those areas in their life. I was recently preaching a retreat, and someone came into confession and they said, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. My last confession was a day ago." And I must admit, my usual reaction to that is, here we go again, somebody who is overly scrupulous. But the person said, "No, I heard a talk recently and it cut me to the quick. And I realized that my confessions have been superficial, that I haven't really addressed this major issue in my life. And I know if I want to come clean before God, if I really want to change, I have to deal with this issue that I've been avoiding for years." I thought, there is the grace of God. There's the grace of conversion. There's a confession that is truly worthy of the name reconciliation. Not focusing on minor stuff, but allowing God's grace to come in and to convict us at a much deeper level than we've seen before. And we only do that through the grace of God. Father Richard Rohr has made the observation, and I totally agree with this, that one of the best places to hide from God is inside religion. Because we do all of these outward practices, and it can look like we're really doing a good job, like we're really holy, but we don't really want to change. We want to hold on to our prejudices. We want to hold on to our way of doing things. That's the sin. That's the sin of the scribes and the Pharisees. And that's why Jesus got so angry and frustrated with them. Because it was all about outward show. It was about controlling, manipulating these outward practices, but no interior change. As you know, I live and work at the Bellarmine Retreat House. I've been there now for 18 years. And there are some people who come there, who have been coming for many, many years, and I'm happy that they're coming for many years. But what they brag about is, I've been coming on retreat for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. I say, well, how has it changed you? I've been coming on retreat for 20 years. It's not about how many years you've been coming on retreat, nor is it about how many masses you've been coming to, or how many rosaries you've prayed, or how many candles you've lit, or how many novenas you've prayed. All of those are good and pious practices. Please don't misunderstand me. But if the focus is, I've done this, period, I've prayed this rosary, I've gone to this mass, I've done this novena, and it doesn't change you, what good is it? Why are we here? If it isn't to look in the mirror of truth and to be able to see those areas where we resist God, and all of us resist God. And if you're thinking right now, Father Michael, what are you talking about? I don't resist God. Then you're the person that I'm talking to. Maybe use this example. Jesus is talking about bodily functions today, isn't he? He's talking about food. He's talking about digestion. He's talking about it passing into the latrine. Here's two bodily examples. If you're standing next to a person who has bad breath, that is very obvious. But it's very difficult to know that when we have bad breath, that we're the person with bad breath. It's only if you see somebody reacting to you, or if you put your hand in front of your mouth, that you can realize, oh my goodness, that's me. We can see it in everybody else. We can smell it in everybody else. It's very difficult to smell the fact that we have bad breath because we're used to it. Same thing is true of body odor. We get used to it. It's our smell. We don't smell it. I had a rude awakening at the retreat house a couple of weeks ago. I was standing next to a person, and they were pretty close. They were coming quite close to me, and all of a sudden I smelled this body odor, and I said, should I say something to this person? You know, they really need to deal with this. This is offensive. And then a little while later, I was standing next to someone else, and they was kind of close to me, you know, in the close quarters, and I smelled that body odor, and I said, boy, there's another person. Why aren't they taking care of their hygiene? Then I happened to brush up against my sleeve, and all of a sudden I smelled that same odor, and that person was me. Here I was projecting it onto them, and I realized I had pulled a dirty shirt out of the closet. You know, when you got a lot of black shirts, it's sometimes hard to tell. The point is, it's a grace to be able to know our sin. It's a grace to be able to see these areas in our lives that need to change. But it's like a mask that fits so tightly over our face, and it's there, we can't see it. Problem is, everybody else can see the mask. Now, they may get used to our mask, and they just say, oh, that's Father Michael, that's the way he is. That's Rory, that's the way he is. But the difficulty is, after a while, we don't even think that we have a mask. But we're so acutely aware of everybody else's mask. It's a grace. It's a grace, a great grace, to at least be able to see it. That's the beginning of change. Now, to pray for the grace to be able to not put the mask on, that's a whole other grace, but it begins with at least seeing it. This is me. I'm selfish, I'm greedy, I'm judgmental, I'm arrogant, I'm proudful, I'm lustful. Whatever it is, to be able to see that and own that and not project it onto somebody else. I think that's what Jesus is talking about here today. It's a truism in our society is that we recognize that we are a divided nation. We're divided in our politics, we're divided in our race, we're divided in our economy, and we're divided as to what the solutions are. But the problem is, so many of us, myself included, fall into the trap of thinking, yeah, we're divided. If only people would start thinking the way I do, it would be so much better. Problem is, we fall into that trap of I'm right and I'm wrong. Within a week, I had 2 conversations with people. One person coming up to me and saying, Father Michael, I honestly don't believe how a person can be a Catholic and be a Democrat. A couple days later, somebody came up to me and said, Father Michael, I honestly don't believe how somebody can be a Catholic and be a Republican. I said, well, talk to this person over here. They'll clue you in. Another story, I was at Loyola University for 10 years working in young adult ministry. And Father Daniel Berrigan, a Jesuit peace activist in the midst of the Vietnam War, came. And he was invited by the students on campus because the Iraq War was raging. And there were signs on the campus that were very derogatory toward President Bush. I won't use the terms that the signs had. And Father Berrigan, who was arrested for his civil disobedience toward the Vietnam War, who spent time in jail because of that activism, came and he looked around and he saw the signs. And he said, President Bush isn't the problem. The problem is the violence inside our hearts. If you think the problem is our president, then you haven't looked inside your own hearts. The problem is the tendency that we have is to vilify the other, to project the evil onto the other and to say the problem is there. I was shocked. And the students who had invited him to the campus suddenly were shrinking down in their chairs and looking down at the ground because, of course, what they expected from this peace activist, the guy who had been arrested, gone to jail for opposing the Vietnam War, he expected him to say, "That's right, let's get rid of him. Bring that president down. We need a change of regime." Now, Father Berrigan wasn't in favor of the Iraq War, but he said, where do these wars come from? They come from our vilification of the other. What does Jesus teach us? Love your enemies. Love your enemies. It doesn't mean that your enemies aren't your enemies. It doesn't mean that you can't disagree with them. No, there are issues that are significant, and we have to debate those, and we're going to argue about those. But we don't vilify them. We don't say you're evil. Because we recognize that same evil, when we vilify another person, then we fall into the very trap that we're criticizing the other person of. We're vilifying them, and we're giving into that hatred and that judgmental attitude inside ourselves. How do we get out of that? Except praying with a great sincerity of heart for the Holy Spirit to come and to say, Lord, show me the mask. Give me the grace to take it off. Give me the humility to recognize I'm part of the problem. Give me the humility to be able to say I am a sinner, and to own the fact that the Lord loves us. The Lord knows us. He knows us through and through. He can see his X-ray vision into our hearts. He sees all the areas in which we're blocked. And he says, bring that to me, humbly. Ask me to change your hearts. Ask me to change your minds. Because that's the only way we're going to change. Christianity is not a self-help program. We Americans love self-help. It's not our Catholic Christian faith. Do we need to cooperate with the grace? Yes. But it starts with our begging for the grace of recognizing, I've dug a hole and I can't get out of it myself. We as a nation have dug a hole and we can't get out of it ourselves except through God's grace. We got to cooperate with that grace. We got to use that grace. We got to act upon that grace. But it begins with asking for it. Lord, show me the truth. Help me to change. Change our hearts this time. Amen.
Heart to heart, hand in hand, praying for grace to understand. Spirit of Jesus, open our hearts to live and to love the gospel.